we're going. We are on the record. And one of the things that I like to talk about, school sports. This have nothing to do with steroids. What we're talking about is how are they funded? We're going to look, in this brand new season, we're going to look at some of the issues affecting school sports. But one of the most important things is how are school sports funded? All these alma mater old boys and all of these things, how do they get the money? On the 8th of February, St. Mary's College, my old school, Arazataza, they're having Fete with the Saints. And this year they have Marshall Montana, among others. Tickets are $800. Check it out. Come and support one of the oldest schools. It's 150 years old. Come and support some saints doing good things with their sports program. And education is not just about what you read in a book. It's about a holistic development of a young Trini. So check that out. If you're going to an all-inclusive, go to your old school all-inclusive. You don't have to go to my school, but go to your old school. Tonight we're still talking about performance-enhancing drugs, and we have Mr. Anderson on the set. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to call some names. Boston Lloyd, C.T. Fletcher, Carly Muscle. These are names very familiar in the bodybuilding world. But they're all very, very large men. Some of them are what they call natural, some of them juiced. C.T. Fletcher says he's a natural bodybuilder. What is the big debate for natural versus assisted? What do they call that?
The natural movement, they tend to call it the natty movement, or you have the guys who, you know, well, nobody really wants to admit to using performance-enhancing steroids.
Why?
Why? Because of the stigma associated with it. Because of the criminalization of it also depends on where you live. If you live in the U.S., depending on the sport that you're in, you cannot come out and say that you use steroids. You're going to be tested. You're going to end up like Lance Armstrong.
You sell performance-enhancing drugs. Do you sell these drugs to elite-level athletes outside of bodybuilding or outside of that body sport?
Yes, there are a few people who purchase outside of bodybuilding, of course.
Can I believe that sometime in the past year, somebody who would have been on a sports page in Trinidad and Tobago is a client of yours?
More than likely, yes.
And you're not the only person doing this.
Of course not.
Do you think that Trinidad and Tobago elite athletes, and we know of 2 of them last year were tested positive for controlled substances. Do you know of any elite level athletes personally that are using PEDs?
I would say for the most part in Trinidad, not so much.
Not so much.
Right? But there are a few people that use because you need to get the edge. If this is the sport that you love, you need to have an edge.
Do you see somebody running on a TV and say, hey, that's my guy?
Yes, it has happened before.
Yes. Really?
Yeah.
In Trinidad, we have supposed to have in this calendar year the initiation of the Trinidad and Tobago Anti-Doping Authority. We have the example of the Jamaica anti-doping, which was a complete failure in 2012, the Olympic year, where they only did 11 out of competition tests for the entire season before the Olympics and after the Olympics, actually. So we're seeing that. Do you think Trinidad and Tobago can handle what you're selling?
Drug enforcement and drug testing is a challenge in any country, in the US, in wherever it's going to be, because anytime there's money involved, anytime there's sport involved, people are going to use. They're going to find ways around the system. I am not very confident in our initial drug testing program. I'm going to wait and see how that goes.
What if today, tomorrow, they tell you you can make a jail?
Well, that is going to change the landscape a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you still
No, I'm
Be
not.
in
I'm
this-
not. I'm not willing to do anything illegal. No, I'm not. I'm not going to take the risk.
You're too pretty for jail.
Yeah, correct. Doesn't make sense.
When you look at the realm of sporting accomplishment, you have in Trinidad and Tobago, you have athletes in cricket, track and field, you have football players, cyclists. Each sport we have representatives at the highest level, international elite. When you think about what you do in terms of what they do, how do you feel about it? Is there a moral dilemma?
No, no moral dilemma whatsoever. Because the average man, the layman that's gonna get the information via TV or via sports shows or whatever it may be, is not gonna know how widespread and how necessary performance enhancing drugs are for the level of sport that we have now. American football cannot exist without performance enhancing steroids. Bodybuilding at the level it's at now cannot exist without that. Cycling at the level it is at now cannot exist without that.
And you say that with no blink, it's definitive for you. There's no question for you.
Most definitely.
What about track and field?
Also, of course, track and field.
Certain Jamaican athletes, their father talked about the specific type of cassava grown in that countryside in Jamaica.
Okay, all right. Now, it's not impossible to have genetic anomalies.
Right.
I am not saying there is one out of every 500 people who is going to be able to run the 100 meters in 9 point something and do it eating cassava and mango and whatever. But the likelihood of all 8 men on that track running that 100 meters not being on performance enhancing steroids is slim to none.
Slim to none. So you think it's just really a case of finding the right combination of testing, timing, and
What? Most correct. There are different types of steroids, there are different steroids that have different effects on your body and that are going to exit your system at different times as well. There's a lot of money involved in track and field and stuff as well. So once you pay the right people to hush, or you pay the right people to provide you with a urine sample, you're all right. Most of the time, I think these fellas get busted when they get greedy or when people start to talk.
or when they self-medicate.
That too.
We have to have some kind of balance between the reality of the sports, the reality of the world that we live in. Most of these young athletes would be living in an at-risk community, would be people who have no affinity for, and I shouldn't say most, quite a few, would have no affinity for academic accomplishment. They're not interested in books, but they could run real fast, or they're really, really strong, or they could hit you really, really hard on a pitch. You know what I mean? So you're asking yourself, are you going to know what is the, why we have a problem with drugs in sport? Why do you think you have a problem with this?
I think it's the way that the actual performance enhancing drug was criminalized in the first place. I think it's also ignorance, it's a lack of information as well. It's a lack of information in terms of what the drug actually does, how it works, how dangerous it is, as opposed to the type of misinformation that is being put out by the media and by people who don't know better, that kind of thing.
You know what's funny? We teach our kids this. Popeye the Sailor Man takes a can of spinach, all of a sudden, right? Batman is the only superhero who doesn't have some kind of secret power. Everybody else is pumped except you, Batman. How do you feel that this conditioning for our kids is affecting what the reality we're seeing on the...
Of course it does. The media pushes an image. Well, they have to sell their products, whatever it may be. And they push an image. It's a little worse for women, I think. But it has changed over the past few years. Men also suffer from body image issues. And, you know, I mean, look, for example, there was a very interesting documentary called Bigger, Stronger, Faster. And one of the things that the psychologist made reference to was look at the action figure from when you were a little boy, right? G.I. Joe was pretty slim looking, wasn't he? If you go into excellent stores now and you pick up one of the action figures, he's
They all look like you,
ridiculously
man.
buff.
Yeah, for real.
Exactly. So from young, as a young man or whatever, you're already being bombarded by these images of what a man is supposed to look like, which is better, bigger, stronger, faster, that kind of thing. So, you know, you're influenced by that, whether or not you want to admit it or not.
On that, I want to wrap up. Also, you need to look at the box that thing came in. There are no balls. This is on the record. This is your boy Tate. I want to thank you for coming.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. Like it now, share it now. We go on next week.
Tonight.